Lavine is here already. So just to give our introduction to our speaker, um, Lavine is the founder and CEO of a leading edtech and future of work company in Hong Kong, and he founded his company through bootstrapping. We'll know about it later as he explained. And he has a regional track record of Xccelerate that is founded on a vision that the greatest opportunity for improving is lives through education. Lavine serves as a vice president of the Artificial Intelligence Society of Hong Kong, board of directors of the 24-hour race, the largest movement against modern slavery. He's also the president of Founders Circle, an ecosystem of high-impact entrepreneurs, and non-executive director of RH Software, which is a marketplace for tech platform and empowering high potential talent. Lavine began his career in investment banking in New York City at Lazard's Mergers and Acquisitions division, and he held investment roles at Atlas Capital, Marwar Capital, Union Park Capital, and Thread Genius. So, without further ado, let's welcome Lavine on stage. Hi, Lavine. Welcome to FEW.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on board.
So, would you please tell us about yourself, your journey, and of course, what is bootstrapping? And I'm sure we will be able to get golden nuggets of insight from you. So, I'll let you take over with your speech.
Sounds good. Well, just before I begin, I just want to say thank you to female entrepreneurs worldwide. It's my absolute pleasure and honor to be working with you and to partner up with you to inspire the next generation of entrepreneurs. And so huge thank you to you both for all the effort that you guys put in up until this event and for all the great work that we're going to do this year. My name is Lavine, and I'm the founder and CEO of Xccelerate. We are a leading edtech company. We are upskilling and reskilling workforces, governments, enterprises, societies, and individuals to basically be ready for the future of work. And this means giving people skills and talent to solve the huge human capital crises when it comes to preparing talent in areas like artificial intelligence, software engineering, cloud, cybersecurity, any area that you can think of when it comes to design, product management, UI and UX. So we are really, really passionate as a company to use education to employment to solve labor market challenges and to really just create a better world using education as a sort of core pillar of impact. We have been around for just under 4 years, and we've upskilled and reskilled about 10,500 people. And it's been a marvelous journey. Some pretty crazy highs, some pretty crazy not so highs. And along the way, I've learned a lot, and very, very grateful to have an amazing team that has supported me along the journey. Prior to this, I was an investment banker in Wall Street. I didn't find that to be the most exciting or inspiring career, so I actually left that to go build some schools in Africa, which is where I found a calling, a huge love for education and just a huge admiration and awe for what education can do for not only the individual, but for the community and for the society that it surrounds itself. So being out in Africa and seeing schools transform villages into real towns and real cities really showed me that education is one of the greatest drivers for humanity's progress. And so that's really our mission as a company at this stage. I'd be happy to go into my story. I just want to make sure this is as useful as possible for everyone out here listening. So please feel free to ask any questions at all. And happy to just go right into the story a little bit and how we got started using bootstrapping. And then if at any point, any questions at all, I want to make it super, super casual. So feel free to stop me at any point. Does that sound like a plan? Yeah. Okay. Crystal, is that okay? I assume so, Christelle?
Yes, absolutely. So, of course, you can proceed with your story, and then for those who will come up with questions, feel free to raise your hand. And of course, Lavin, we also have prepared questions from ourselves, which are really interesting to know, just not just from the audience, and just really personally, and for us as a team as well. So, yeah, let's proceed with your sharing.
Awesome. Sounds good. So after I left Wall Street, I was traveling the world. I was on a sabbatical for about 6 months. I went to 27 countries, everywhere from Iran and Bosnia and Jordan and Namibia and South Africa and Argentina and all these different countries. And I was just truly inspired by how beautiful the world is and how amazing certain education systems were when it came to propelling their countries and their people forward. And of course, where there was plenty of very smart people who may not have had access to really good education systems and opportunities. So that was really one of the sort of sparking points to understand, hey, there's a huge inequality in the world. The countries that have really great education systems are going to accelerate themselves, for lack of a better word, and those that don't are holding themselves behind. It's almost like a water bottle. It's like education system is the cap. You know, it can really create potential, or it can also really hold back potential of humanity. So and I saw this over and over as I was traveling the world. So when I came back to Hong Kong, which is home for me, I found that one of the biggest challenges in tech, in sort of moving Hong Kong as a city of the future, was human capital. You look at Silicon Valley, you look at Singapore, you look at Shenzhen, you look at regional tech hubs. What they've done really well is get the human capital equation right. And in Hong Kong, I was really hurt because this is home for me. And you have so many amazing startups that have access to infrastructure and co-working spaces and investors and really, really smart capital and just so much aspiration to use entrepreneurship as a way to move society forward, you know, using business as a way to make good for the world, which I really, really believe in. But very few of them had access to cutting edge data engineers, and data scientists, and software engineers, and product managers, and UI and UX designers. I mean, top startups, after you raise money or ready to invest in these areas, it would take 5, 6, even 12 months to go hire these people. How do you become an innovative city of the future if it's so hard to find this talent, right? So this is one of the greatest challenges that Hong Kong was facing, and I think many, many cities in Asia. You know, we operate in Singapore, we do work in Taipei, we've done work in Malaysia, we've done work in Philippines, we've done work in so many different cities and countries across Asia, and the same challenge is there. And it's not that there's no resources, you know, with the internet and Coursera and Udemy, plenty of materials. That is not the bottleneck. It's just very difficult to translate that into education to employment, you know, taking a whole new generation of um, you know, ex accountants, ex lawyers, ex housewives, ex whatever it is, and making them into data scientists and software engineers so they actually fulfill the labor market needs of tomorrow is really, really hard for traditional university systems because they're so obsolete. And so this was a problem. I set out and said to myself, what is the problem that's happening here, right? I love education. I found this calling, but I don't really want to go run a chain of tutorial centers. That's not really what I want to do. I want to connect that to what will help society as much as possible. And so the birth of Xccelerate came around. I had spent all my money from Wall Street on traveling the world, so I didn't really have much money left. I was down to my last 500 US dollars. I just was traveling to so many different countries and doing this crazy sabbatical that it was very little money left. But, you know, I didn't even really think about it that much when I said, hey, I want to go start this thing. I'm really attached to education. I didn't once think about, hey, would I get investors? How will I fund it? Where will the money come from? I just really transfixed my attention on solving the problem, which is education to employment is fundamentally broken. So the next day, a idea came in to start a company called Applerate, which is a terrible name. So then that changed to App Xcelerate, which was also an even worse name. And then eventually it became Xcelerate, just nice, clean, and simple. But I'm thankful it's not called Applerate. It's a really, really silly name. But then I said, hey, why don't I create a website? And I did that. I showed that to a few people. and I said, we are solving the education to employment gap in software engineering. I did some studying and I found that that was a critical talent gap. So I started speaking to companies and said, hey, where do you struggle to hire the most? It's really good software engineering talent. Again, I was like 22, 23 when I started. So I was really, really confused most of the time. But when I was figuring it out, it was this problem solving approach to solving real problems for society. That came first and foremost. It was not about the money part. It was really, how can I do as much good as I possibly can for the world and for Hong Kong and other cities? So understanding that the real problem was software engineering, understanding that people in Hong Kong would love to go become software engineers. There was a demand for people to become software engineers that worked at really cutting edge startups. But there was no platform, there was no way for that to happen. You could either go to a 4-year degree, which is not very effective because you're learning things from 20 years ago. You could go to boot camps and education platforms online, which, again, there's no job element. I mean, when was the last time anyone hired someone because they took a Coursera course? And there was also the element of going to programs abroad, but it's very expensive. And there were some international companies that were offering this, but they were also really, really expensive because I myself wanted to go become a software engineer. And I couldn't afford to because I'd spent all my Wall Street bonuses and savings on traveling the world. So next thing I knew, the website turned into a business because by having that website just out there, terrible logo, just built it in 30 minutes. It was something. It was something that I could use to show to real customers. And I just kept iterating and iterating and iterating and asking customers, hey, would you want to do this? If not, why? If yes, why? Vice versa with companies. Would you hire this sort of talent? And so within an idea, and then 7 weeks later, we had collected upfront deposits for students to take the first course. I was personally doing everything from sales to getting the website up to getting the bank account, incorporating it. But with no money, really, I was able to show people that they could sign up for this course. We used what they call a negative working capital business, where students are paying upfront, pay instructors later. And so I had 16 students, each of which that paid a deposit of the course is typically around 45,000 Hong Kong dollars. And then 16 students had paid something around 20,000. So that was 300,000 Hong Kong dollars, which was my seed capital. That was my seed round. And so from there, I was able to go talk to WeWork, and I was able to go negotiate a lease. I was able to speak to some instructors, some curriculum providers. And so I kind of just packed it together in some ways, just put it together. And I think the less I thought about I don't have any money, and the more I thought about the problem, the rest really just figured itself out. So when the first cohort started graduating and people were getting jobs and then the word spread, then we started planning the next one. Even then, we were on really, really low amounts of money. So we said, hey, this is every 4 months. What can we do to also bolster that? Then we started running part-time courses, which can run every month. And we realized that not everyone can quit their job for 4 months to learn, so they can start doing courses in the evening. And then we started building a talent solutions business. So we wanted to help students get jobs with companies. And then we started talking to a lot of different companies, and they said, hey, why don't you do the training for us as well, upskill people within our companies? Then that started a sort of enterprise and government training business. And so one thing or another kind of just kept popping up, and I would try and step back and say, hey, is this an opportunity that adds value to our customers, or is this an opportunity that doesn't? And by looking at them and not worrying about the cash or the money part, but saying, does this solve someone's problem? We were able to use a variety of different business lines and products and services that complemented each other, which then allowed us to become a platform. Right. Today, we operate as an edtech marketplace platform, which means we have partners, hundreds of companies we work with. We have tons of instructors. We've had thousands of alumni. We are a marketplace that is able to connect instructors, employers, curriculum providers, learners, and make sure that we're able to solve this problem. And we did take a little bit of money. Just last year, there was a really incredible angel investor that was trying to expand us regionally. But for the first few years, everything was just really frugal and really, really bootstrapped. And I find that is a great way to build a business because you're just so focused on the problem. And when you have so little money, you are then forced to use your brains. You're forced to be very, very creative. And if you see constraints as a glass half empty equation, then you'll always find a way to complain about it. But if you see constraints as an enabler for creativity, glass is half full, then it actually forces you to build a really strong, problem-solving, iconic business that just serves society. And I don't want to comment. I think that there are some businesses that really do need investor capital. But even some of the best businesses that need investor capital, I find, having spoken to many, many founders, that it is really helpful to run the first 2-3 years, build the base purely on customer revenues because you really get to put yourself in the customer eye and shoes. And by bootstrapping it, you force yourself to be really, really creative. And I think what's most important is you start to be way more focused on value creation than valuation. You know, there's this treadmill that happens when you raise a Series A, Series B, Series C, seed, round, all these things. You get so obsessed about the rounds. Again, I generalize, not everyone's like this, but you start to get really attached to the wrong things, which moves away from the soul of what you're doing, which is to change people's lives with education and help them get jobs and find new meaning in career and self-actualization to help society move forward. So I try to stay away from all of that, and it is slightly unconventional. But I find that by building a strong network of business lines that support each other and just really focusing on the value creation, not the valuation, that more than ever we are doing the right things and we've grown substantially. So yeah, that's a little bit about us. I'd be very happy to open it up to some questions.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you so much for sharing. You've mentioned really it was a tough and yet fulfilling journey. I've noticed that it kind of came spontaneously for you. It wasn't correct me if I'm wrong, it wasn't as much planned as a traditional um business would be. So can you let us know what is the extent of your planning if a company wants to go proceed with bootstrapping? What kind of planning do they need to do?
The only plan you need to have is a sense of, in my opinion, what you're trying to do, what problem you're trying to solve, and who the first 5 or 10 customers can be, should be, and a plan to go get meetings with them.
Mm-hmm.
Outside of that, things change so much in the first 3 to 6 months and the first few years that over planning it. I've seen friends of mine that go start businesses. You talk to them in January, hey, yeah, I'm planning to start a business. You talk to them in June, hey, yeah, I'm planning to start a business. The next year, hey, yeah, I'm trying to start a business. So I find that the best thing to do is to just go talk to customers and solve problems rather than spend an inordinate amount of time planning. So my plan was, can I get this website up? Can I just get the first course running? Can I get like 10 customers? And can I make sure that we can run the first program successfully? That's all it was.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So we have a question from our audience. Tatsiani Tevi, she submitted a question. Would you want to address it directly to Lavine, or you want me to read your question? Let's see,
What is the
Tatsiani.
successful formula you found and follow to start a business when you literally have no money?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the number one equation I can say is it's almost like you're climbing Mount Everest,
Mm-hmm.
and when you're starting a business, Mount Everest looks like it's this incredibly ambitious goal. So don't spend your time trying to look at the top of the goal. Just look at your shoes and make sure you're taking the first step and the second step and the first step and the second step. I think as long as you're making progress every single day, one step at a time, one day,
Mm-hmm.
that are one, revenue generating, two, that solve customer needs, and three, bring in cash flow. Like, don't think about profits and losses, just think about cash flow on day one. the rest takes care of itself. If you spend so long thinking and planning, how am I going to get to the top of that hill? One, it's very demotivating, and two, you don't actually end up making a lot of progress. But you can make a lot of progress, a lot more than you think you can, by just putting your head down and just doing one step at a time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good nugget. It's one step at a time. Otherwise, we'll get overwhelmed with the goal, and we somehow um get scared, and then we don't move forward, right? So I hope that answered your question, Tatsiani. So just for everyone's information, Tatsiani asked, "What is the successful formula for Lavine found in his journey in starting a business with literally no capital from investors?" So let's have another question from Melanie. Her question is, how did you start your course with less capital? Would you like to share how you found your leads, and what funnel um, did you use?
Yeah. Um, the funnel is called brute force. Brute force means I didn't know anything about marketing and funnels, but I reached out to 1,000 people on LinkedIn and on Facebook and on Angel List that were signed up in coding groups and all. And I just said, hey, I'm doing this. Can we chat? Can we meet? Can we talk? Is this of interest? Just pure outbound trying to get in touch with them. There was no funnel. After that, I started running a marketing campaign on Facebook and Instagram, but it wasn't really up until we had the first 7 or 8 students, which I manually recruited. I think people think being a CEO or founder is super, super glamorous, but I find that you should be willing to pull up your sleeves and just be as brute force as possible. Go talk to them, go meet them. If you have to go travel to Kowloon, just go there and meet them and talk to them. So the marketing funnels after that, I understood what they were looking for. I understood that, oh, you're targeting a certain type of demographic, ages 25 to 35, male and female in a job that's boring. Started to learn some code in college or find it interesting that tech is becoming a big part of our world. So then I was able to use those parameters and run some marketing campaigns. And then I was able to also recruit some marketing people later to handle that part, because I think what's most important is you find as an entrepreneur, the faster you can discover something, see if it adds value, so value creation, not valuation, and then fire yourself from that job, so automate yourself from it, the more successful you'll be. So marketing, right? Okay. This is something I'm doing. I figured it out. It's bringing in customers and leads. But then I found a way to fire myself from that by getting someone else to do it. Same with sales. So I think that is something that helped me a lot.
Yeah, automation, right? So it really saves time for us, our team, ourselves, so then we can move on doing other tasks without necessarily having a lot of people on our paycheck, or even our time, which is also, as a founder, is costly and expensive. We thank you so much for submitting your questions. We're receiving quite a few. So we have another one from Petula. She asks, how important were your connections in the first stages of starting your business?
How important were my connections? Could you clarify that?
Mhm. Maybe she asked if you're starting as an entrepreneur and you do not know anyone who might be interested in your product. How do you find people who to reach out to? Maybe that's what she asked. And how do you strengthen your network? How do you meet people more? Maybe you can elaborate how you found those partners, how you found those leads.
I actually find that there's a lot of value in coming into a brand new business or industry with absolutely no network and no knowledge. So I was an investment banker. I
Mm-hmm.
had never coded a day in my life, but I found the education aspect super, super inspiring. What that translates into is you come in starting to question assumptions. Why is it like this? Why is it like that? And some of the most successful companies are those built by outsiders. Actually, there's a great book called Outsiders, 8 Unconventional CEOs, which I highly recommend everyone read. And what it shows is that coming in with zero knowledge and zero connections is actually better than coming in with a history. I mean, if I worked in universities, for example, or education, for example, for 30 years, I would not have built what I built today. It would have been very, very different. Same with those that, I mean, Elon Musk, for example, he never worked in space or auto. Auto was traditionally from Detroit, and space was traditionally just governments like NASA. So he came in with a radically different approach. And I find that that is really, really powerful, coming in with zero connections. Now you come in and then you start to find really, really smart people. So I went and I started talking to startups, and I said, why is it so hard to find software engineers? And I really kept my mouth shut, had a notebook, and just kept listening. And patterns start to emerge, right? If you just sit there and keep listening and talk to 20, 30 people and say, hey, why is it so hard for you to get a job as a software engineer, even though you're doing this online degree in coding or you've done this course in HKU? Really understanding their problem and just really keeping my mouth shut was a great way to build connections. I would try and break it down. So what is really an education or a classroom? It's curriculum, it's content, it's an environment like a space, a co-working space. It's an instructor or a mentor or some facilitator, some guide. That's all it really is, a person, some content, and an environment. But when you go to online courses, it's really just course. There's no environment. There's no person. When you go to traditional universities, it's all three of those, but the course isn't right. And then if you can combine all three of them in a way that allows for something beautiful to come out, it's kind of like taking a systems view to things, right? If you want to build really great meals, you have to get really, really great ingredients. The input of each system is going to lead to really great output. So if I started looking at a really great environment, and really good instructors, and really good curriculum, and defining that even further, what makes great content is easy to understand, and it solves the need to go get the job, then I try to, with that outsider perspective, question a lot of things and use curiosity as a way to find patterns with connections. And then slowly you just start to get word of mouth, and I think that's a great way to grow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. Like when you're doing great at your job, you get passed on via word of mouth or any other funnels, and then you get known for the good work that you're doing, and that's how you get more network and get connected to people, right? We have a few questions. Maybe we'll have to. It would be great if we can hear from them directly. I'd like to invite Sherry to ask her question directly to Lavine on stage. Okay. Okay, she's not available to unmute her mic, so I'll just ask her question here and read it out loud for the others to hear. How do you find the good suppliers internationally and form a partnership? It's hard to know whether the foreign suppliers are reliable, especially when we're remotely communicating and only through internet. So how do you establish that quality through the partners that you.
Suppliers, meaning what specifically? Like in an education context or a marketplace, that could be instructors or curriculum creators, or like what sort of suppliers and what sort of partnerships? That would just be helpful to understand.
Sherry, would you like to type in more information about your question? So with the kind of business Lavine is doing, maybe it's more about the instructors. How do you source your instructors? Are they, of course, they're also suppliers of knowledge, right? Are they from abroad? Are they from Hong Kong? Or how do you source them? Lavine, can you hear me well?
Yeah, I can hear you loud
Okay.
and clear.
Okay, Sherry, would you like to elaborate? You can type in the chat. And as per the others, if you have questions, you can also click the raise hand button so we can invite you on stage to ask your question directly and get to elaborate. There's also a question from Petula. Your question is your business associates from previous roles, but it's quite vague. Would you like to elaborate as well, or maybe unmute so you can have a conversation with Lavine yourself? So for now, we'll move on to the next question from Anisha. I'll try to unmute you, Anisha, and invite you on stage so you can ask the question. Okay, let's see if. Hi, Anisha.
Hi, hi, hi. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Can
we
you
can
hear?
hear you.
Yeah, hi, hi. I'm working from home, so don't look appropriate to turn on the video. Sorry about that. Anyway, it's a very simple culture. I really appreciate your sharing about bootstrapping. So, one of the major issues we face with startups is finding talents. When you bootstrap, you're not able to find the best talents you've got, and we are in a predominantly gig economy. So just share with us how do you overcome that? How do you get work done? And if it's a remote culture that you have, how did you manage expectations if your talents are from different cultures and cultural backgrounds? I think at the end of the day, more than product and services, it's about managing expectations between humans. So I think that's my biggest hurdle because sometimes I'm like, just get it done. So how did you overcome that?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question, and I think many people have their own way of dealing with it. There's no right or wrong answer. There's just understanding your personal business and where you are and what sort of uh, talent you have. Uh, we struggled to attract talent a lot in the first few years. When you're a bootstrap company, you can't afford to pay as much, and you're just so conscientious of spending every dollar that you really do need to make sure two things. One, that they're missionary, not mercenary. So I would make sure someone who is joining us, and I made this mistake a lot, not for a job, but for the mission of what we were doing to change lives through education. Whenever that happened, it became a lot easier to align on later things like KPIs and OKRs because they just got it. Whenever I hired someone who was just looking for a job, I almost always had to let them go or see them waste time, and that really drove me crazy. So number one thing is to find people who are mission driven, not sort of mercenary. And then number two, if they're mission driven, to find ways that are creative. So if you're a bootstrap company, you can't afford a high base, right? You can afford maybe a lower base and offer bonuses for them to hit certain things that compensate for that, or get them stock options if they're good enough. So you try and use different inputs as a way to substitute, and then you focus on the mission and that the work is really, really important and meaningful to them. And typically that works out much better than trying to poach talent and use like expensive salaries, because it just doesn't work. And I've been there. I think the other thing when you're coordinating it across a regional remote team, what's really valuable is to set very transparent OKRs. I find OKRs are really, really a great way to handle a growing operation versus KPIs. OKRs are pioneered by Google and they're very startup centric. So it's a cascading sense of priorities, and then have once a week check-ins at the start of the week and at the end of the week on whether or not the things that we're doing are helping us hit those objectives. So I definitely recommend OKRs as a way to let people across different offices feel very, very transparent. We make the OKRs very public, so everyone in sales know what marketing is doing, what instructors are doing, what engineers are doing, and it's just a way to help everyone to a really high bar of performance. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you also, Anisha, and hope that answered your questions. So moving on, for the others, if you have questions, just click the raised hand so we can unmute you and invite you on stage, just like what we did with Anisha. So moving forward with some of the questions. If, for example, we have a business idea, how do we know if bootstrapping is for us, or if it's better for us to find other ways of finding capital and moving forward with our business? Do you think there's like a business idea which bootstrapping is suited for, or it's only for one business and not the other? Do you have any advice?
I think if you can fund it internally for as long as you can, that is always going to be better. You can ask 100 startup founders, even those that have raised money, and they'll say if they could have used customer funding or internal funding, like non-external VCs and investors, for a longer period of time, they would have. I find some of the most successful startups that raise money but have been bootstrapped for the first 2 years, so they got the product and the customer experience really, really right, and then raise money, is way better than going and raising money because you don't even know what you're building in the first year or two. You're still figuring it out. So I would always recommend, even if you plan to raise money later, find a way to use customers to help fund you for the first 2 years. So just by default, go bootstrap for the first couple of years. I think what's really, really valuable is if you are going to do that, to be creative in the ways that you get customers to confirm that they even want your startup. If you have this offer and no one's even paying for it, well, isn't that so much better than raising a bunch of money and using $1 million to find out if an idea is going to work versus $5,000? So it's this idea of rapid prototyping and keeping yourself as lean as possible to figure out what people value. Again, value creation, not valuation. It's great for the ego. Oh, I raised $1 million from a top VC firm even before I started. But it doesn't make much business sense. Why would you give 30% of your company, even more, before you even have a company, when if you grow that business to 1 million or 5 million in revenue for the first 2 years, that same 30% could become 5% if you were to take external financing. So it's really great for the ego, but I actually think it's really, really expensive form of financing because equity is limited. I personally find that stay away from debt no matter what. Just debt is a very, very bad idea. It will spiral you in very downhill ways. So do not take on debt. I personally do not think debt is a great way to build a business. But each business is unique, so I don't want to make generalizations. I think what's really, really valuable is even if you're building a software business, to try and find a way to build a prototype and then get a customer to pay like some sort of advance. I'm sure you can find a way to get some sort of advance, right? Some sort of freemium, some sort of validation at the lowest possible price. And even if you bootstrap for the first couple of years, you'll be way better off. You have just so much more bargaining power with investors if you're a profitable, growing company.
Thank you so much. That's really a great advice as well, and a good point that if you can advance, if there's some way of advancing, then you don't need an investor, which decreases your sense of ownership of the company and equity. So we have a question from Melanie. Let's invite her on stage. Hi, Melanie.
Hello, hi Christelle, hi Lavine. Um, I it's the first time I've heard about your your point of view about bootstrapping from Lavine, which is it's kind of like a validation stage when you're bootstrapping, because I always felt like it's really hard to start when we are doing our own business, because we have to rely on our own capital and do things the hard way. But I guess there's a silver lining when it comes to that, where like as Lavine said. So I have a question for Lavine. How do you eventually uh, transition from bootstrapping to raising capital? Can you tell us what are the details? What are the details? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't plan to raise capital for a very long time, if at all. I mean, I'd love to see us build a $500 million business, $1 billion business without taking any investor capital at all. It's kind of like you're playing the game, but you're playing the game on extremely hard mode. So if at some point we find that there is a partner, maybe at year 7 or year 10, right now we don't need it, but if at a certain point we're in 10 cities and we want to go from 10 cities to 100 cities, and the right partner comes along, who isn't just giving you a check, but who has maybe reached to hundreds of companies and thousands of governments, and really can enable you with capital, the ability to advance your mission way faster than what you could by yourself. That is where I would consider it, open my mind to it, but also find ways where I could do that partnership without the need for capital. I think it's just a mindset that I want to be bootstrapped for as long as possible, until forever, really. We look at some of the greatest companies that were built prior to the whole VC craze, and they might have taken a bit longer, but they're not like WeWorks. They don't just raise a shit ton of money and then implode a year later. So you want to build it on good foundations, because if you're trying to do something exceptional and long term, then it will take many, many years to do it properly. I would really, really keep investor money as the last route, unless it's a really great investor or there's a lot of value add that comes from it. Other than that, I think 99% of businesses could probably be built bootstrapped. I don't know if that answers your question, Melanie.
Yeah, it does. Because I feel like after I've met a lot of people, we've been conditioned to like, oh, first you start with bootstrap and then eventually you level up to finding your investors or fundraising. Yeah. So this is a very interesting point of view on how to run the business, because I never knew that bootstrapping like for the long term could work. So that really
All,
answers my question.
all the empires and the biggest companies of today were built by people that bootstrapped them. Like VC investing and investor capital wasn't a thing really up until the last 20 years. Before that, look at all the top companies. I mean, I'm sure you've all heard of Oracle. It was an enormous success of a company, but the guy built it by using a consulting company to generate cash flows as a way to pay for his software development until the software was good enough. It took him like 3 or 4 years to build his software, Oracle, and then he started to shut down his consulting firm and add the software piece. So you can use multiple cash flows or multiple business lines to fund each other. And we do that as well. We have a software platform, and it took many years to build. So we just use cash flows from our core businesses in serving customers and serving individuals and serving governments, and do the best we possibly can. But any excess cash flow, we're very, very careful to reinvest it very carefully in the right things that could allow us to have even more value add to up and coming talent that wanted to learn with us. What worked really, really well for us was finding ways to add even more value to our customers. So we recently got government accredited, and that means any startups that we do training for or any companies we do training for, they're able to get 75% off with the government grants that we can help them on. So therefore, we were adding even more value to customers, and we were able to increase the value of our partnerships with these customers because the government partnerships allowed us to decrease the costs. They got more value, which meant they did business with us longer term. And I find that is just a much better way to do business. If you haven't heard of it, Melanie, there's a great book. It's called Scaling Up. And so they talk about different levers. If you can just change 7 levers over the course of a year by 1-2%, you could build a cash generating machine that is, 1, very fun to build, 2, just uses incremental improvement, and 3, funds itself. So I'll write that over here. Highly recommend you check up that book.
That's cool. Yeah. May I know who's the author of this book, please?
It's called Scaling Up by Vern Harnish. It's one of my favorite books on business. That was actually the one that showed me, because I was out there trying to raise money at one point, thinking, hey, we need this. But it's all a mindset. Like, you think you need it, but you actually don't. When I started reading that one, I realized just a few simple tweaks in the business model could generate way more cash. I mean, it's kind of like energy in some ways. Bootstrapping is building solar cells and wind farms where the energy produced is going to be forever. Taking investor capital is like oil and hydrocarbons and petrochemicals, where there's a finite amount and there's a lot of toxicity that comes out of it. And once it runs out, it runs out. You're going to have to move to bootstrapped anyway. So why don't you just, you're going to have to move to clean energy anyway. So why not just start with clean energy to begin with? Like, even if you raise investor money at a certain point, you have to become profitable and be sustainable.
That's a very interesting insight. Thank you so much for answering my questions, Lavine.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much as well, Melanie, for having that question, and I hope that you learned a lot from that. Unfortunately, we're running out of time as our session is only up until 1 o'clock. So thank you so much for joining. Thank you also, Lavine, for joining us. Would you have a last message for our women entrepreneurs here?
Yeah, I'm really, really passionate about seeing more and more female entrepreneurs become successful, especially in tech-driven industries. We announced like $1 million scholarship as well, Xccelerate, to go help women learn skills in artificial intelligence and software and data science, so that they can be, beyond just building simple businesses, traditional businesses, challenge themselves to really unleash their creativity and build tech-driven businesses. I'm really, really grateful that, as a founder and a CEO, I once had this is many years ago, a all male workforce, and today we have a 50-50 balanced, diverse workforce, and it's truly helped us become, 1, a very inclusive community, and 2, it's taught me a lot about what a diverse workforce can do for our customers. We just are so much more capable of diagnosing our blind spots and adding even more value to customers. So I'm really, really grateful for this partnership. And if any of you want to ask me any questions, feel free to, I'll just put my email address, shoot me an email later, or connect with me on LinkedIn. And keep up the great work.
Thank you so much, Lavine, for sharing again. Just so everyone knows, FEW has a new web app which is launched just this month. So we have more sessions like this where you can learn, network, and of course meet amazing people who have such great insights to share, like Lavine here. So if you want to get connected more, join us on our web app, and feel free to email my colleague Ellen. I left the email here and she'll get you in touch. And we'll see you in our platform. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. Thank you, Lavine. It's so great to have you. And have a great afternoon to everyone. See you in our next session this Tuesday, January 26th. We'll give you more information via web app. So please join. Thank you.
Good luck.